David, we are back. So, are we going to talk about magnets today?
Actually, we're not. The reason is, after our last video, a friend of mine asked me an interesting question. When would we be presenting the advanced energy work that I did at NASA, or for NASA? So, the answer is now.
Its fear and pain, and help the people to feel free again. Why don't we listen to the voices in our heart? 'Cause then I know we'll find we're not that far apart. Everybody's got to be happy, everyone should sing. 'Cause we know the joy of life, the peace that love can bring. Thus spoke the wizard in his mountain home. Vision of his wisdom means we'll never be alone. And I will dream on my magic night, and the million silver stars that guide me with their light.
So this work that you did for NASA, David, you have mentioned it from time to time over the years that we've known each other, and I find that very interesting, and I'm looking forward to you telling us more about it.
All right. That work has been summarized from actually 6 years of work and many monthly reports, and there are 2 publications that NASA published of this work, so I will hold them up for the camera.
Advanced Energetics for Aeronautical Application.
That is the title. Now, when we did the first, we didn't know there would be a second, so the first doesn't say Volume 1, but the second one says, same title, and Volume 2.
And this started about 20 years ago, right?
Yes, about late 1999, and then it went into 2005.
Okay, so this is a serious amount of work here. What about, we are going to try to cover a good deal of this in this and a few upcoming videos, but if somebody wants to delve deeper into this, is that possible? Can they get their hands on their own copies of this?
Absolutely. It's all online, and you and I tried to find it about a week ago. We found that following the directions that we give underneath as links, we readily found volume 2. Volume 1 was a little more elusive, but Bjorn was able to find that. I think what happened was volume 1 perhaps did not get updated into their later database that has volume 2. Since
Right,
volume
because
2
they came out a couple of years
came later,
apart, right?
But it is definitely very available.
That's good. So just to make sure also, you did work for NASA, and we want to make sure you're allowed to talk about everything that you're about to tell us.
Absolutely. All of this work is in the public domain, and it's not secret, it's not classified, so there's no problem there. And our videos are what we produce. It just happens to be now on work I did at NASA, but there's no problem there. We're not
No direct
not
affiliation.
linked to NASA, right?
No.
Okay.
So tell me, how did you come about to work to get this job for NASA, and what was the goal of that work?
Well, it's an interesting story. So back in 1999, I was working for an engineering company in Butte, Montana. They're not in business anymore. They've gone out of business. But back then, Dennis Bushnell, the chief scientist at the NASA Langley Research Center in Eastern Virginia, was overseeing projects being done at this company that I worked for. And people knew I was interested in advanced energy ideas. And before I knew it, there was a contract to cover this project. It was under the direction of Dennis Bushnell, and I had help from other people at the NASA Langley Center.
Okay, and what did he want you to do? What was your task?
His goal and my task was to develop the concept, the high-level concept, of an emission-less aircraft, large aircraft that could carry hundreds of people. So the reason for that is that conventional aircraft that burn hydrocarbon fuels, the exhaust goes into the atmosphere, very high altitude where it's cold, forms contrails, and they actually affect the climate somewhat in areas where there is heavy air traffic. So that was the premise for the research.
Okay, so you were to develop an emission-less aircraft,
Right.
To prevent local climate change by heavy air traffic.
Right.
And Dennis Bushnell, did he tell you, was he super specific about what he wanted? Did he give you somewhat of a free rein to explore this? How did that?
Well, actually both. There had to be parameters that we stayed within. The aircraft had to have wings on it and so forth. But it was also a blank sheet of paper
Okay.
that just to bring forth new ideas that people had never thought of before, probably, for propelling an aircraft. So that was the scope, and that was his guidance. It was wide open, but there were boundaries around it.
Okay, so it had to have some root in possibility or
Right.
plausibility.
Right.
And so I know that as we've been looking into this, and you've been looking at these two volumes, you have been looking mostly into this volume number 2 for the material we're covering today, and in our next couple of videos, hopefully, we'll cover that. Why did you start with volume 2?
Reason for that is that in the middle of 2002, Dennis Bushnell wanted me to look into further ideas for energy production, not necessarily related to an aircraft, but they could be. So that meant by that time Volume 1 had been rather well completed. It was based on monthly reports, more than 2 years of work at that point. So Volume 2 then would, from that time forward, have more of so-called advanced energy ideas in it. So we are, but they're also in Volume 1. But we're starting with Volume 2 for that reason. And I look at it like this. Volume 1 is a dinner, Volume 2 is a dessert. So we're going to eat the dessert before the dinner, and they never let me do that when I was a little boy, so we're going to do that.
All right, I'll join you for that. And I guess that's one of the good things about growing up. You get to set your own order of what you eat, right? So here you are working on an emissionless aircraft concept for NASA. And what did you come up with? What was the baseline concepts that you developed?
We did derive a baseline concept. Now, in contrast to even what's standard today, where you're burning a hydrocarbon fuel, and that's the exhaust is emitted right into the atmosphere. In contrast to that, this aircraft, the emissionless aircraft, would burn hydrogen as the fuel. That would be carried as a cryogenic liquid. That hydrogen would be reacted in solid oxide fuel cells to produce electric power. Now it also produces water because it's reacting hydrogen fuel with the oxygen in the air. Now in this case the water has to be carried on board for the rest of the flight, and that is a very heavy weight penalty, which we're going to talk about how that was resolved. And the electric power produced by the fuel cells then runs electric motors which turn the propellers.
Okay.
So that's the high-level basic concept of what came up first to be done.
And how did you calculate all this stuff? I mean, that's...
One of the main things to calculate is the range of an aircraft given the type propulsion system it has, the weight of it, size of it. So at NASA Langley they had computer codes to calculate these for all kinds of aircraft.
Okay.
And they used that, but they had to make a change in it to allow for the increasing weight of the aircraft during the flight. All other aircraft decrease their weight during flight.
Right.
But this was that heavy penalty that I talked about.
Okay, so we're talking almost 20 years ago, and you developed a high-level concept, as you said, for actually an electric-powered aircraft, a passenger aircraft, running on hydrogen fuel cells. And what about this weight penalty you mentioned? You didn't stop there, right? You kept looking into more advanced concepts. Did you manage to find a model that might solve the weight problem?
Yes, that had to be gotten past that very heavy penalty of carrying all the water. So what I wrote about then in the reports, and again, you can download these reports and look at details. We're right now in the videos, we're mainly hitting the highlights. So the idea that came, and then I presented it, is that by using electric and magnetic fields, it's possible to control a nuclear fusion reaction with certain elements that would produce electric power, high electric power, with a very small weight penalty. In other words, the typical nuclear reaction produces about, around number, 1,000,000 times the energy per mass as a typical chemical reaction. So this is what I suggested, and in this case the aircraft would emit nothing, and the weight of the fuel is negligible. This 1,000,000 to 1 ratio makes that happen.
That is very fascinating, but you're actually talking about a nuclear fusion on board a passenger airplane.
That is correct.
And when I hear nuclear fusion, I think about these giant tokamaks they have, where which are gigantic, expensive, and besides producing very cool pictures when they're under experiments, as far as I know, they haven't even managed to produce excess power yet. So
That is correct.
how does that translate to?
There are other ways to produce a nuclear fusion on a fairly small scale. So I introduce this book. You want to remember his name, Philo T. Farnsworth. He is the inventor of electronic television. That took him decades to achieve. He had to invent new vacuum tubes to create the whole structure of television. He saw some interesting things occur inside his vacuum tubes. That led him to the idea and then the invention of a small scale, about this big, nuclear fusion reactor, fits on a bench top, where he was fusing using special electrodes and high voltage. He was fusing hydrogen isotopes, hydrogen 2, which is deuterium, and hydrogen 3, which is tritium, and they produce ordinary balloon grade helium and neutrons. He was making billions, some people say up to 1 trillion neutrons per second with his benchtop reactor. So the concept, where I'm not saying I originated it, but what I put forth was, instead of using the 2 hydrogen isotopes, to use, there's a no nuclear reaction of hydrogen, ordinary hydrogen 1, and boron. Now, most of boron in nature is boron 11, so that reaction goes as hydrogen plus boron 11 gives carbon 12, but it's in an excited state of that nucleus, so it splits into 3 helium nuclei, which are charged. That represents a high electric power done on a larger scale than his benchtop, but still able to fit in an airplane. And then that high voltage electricity can be down converted in voltage to drive motors, to run the aircraft, or to do anything else. So I'm going to show now, this actually is a picture. When you download or look at these publications, they're in color. The illustrations are in color, whereas my copy's in black and white. So here's a picture, and you can see on here the hydrogen comes in this side. This is a schematic. It's not a pictorial picture of what the thing would look like. It's a schematic diagram. The hydrogen would come in on one side, a volatile boron compound, and I used them when I worked in the semiconductor industry. That would come in on the other side. So it's not a vacuum, but it's a very low pressure. And then there's high voltage between the inner grid and the outer grid. So when the reaction occurs, the helium nuclei fly out towards the outer grid. That is the current that is collected at a high voltage, and then that goes through a process to reduce the voltage and is extracted as usable power. That is the concept.
So I gotta say that. So you set out to solve a problem of propulsion for aircraft, but this concept, if working, could be used to power just about anything, right?
That's right, anything. So, when I was putting together the information for this video, what I came across, there's actually a company that is developing the hydrogen-boron reaction, so that the company name is HB11, put it right in there in their name, Energy, HB11 Energy. I have no connection to them, and we give links to the things we talk about. But their plan is to have a mixture containing boron and hydrogen, and hit it with a laser pulse, and then release the extra energy that comes from the same reaction. So Philo Farnsworth, his approach to control nuclear fusion was his electrical device, but these people were using a laser beam to do the same thing. Very, very interesting.
Very interesting, and exciting possibilities there. And since you're showing this book, you encouraged me to buy it, and I'm glad I did.
Right. It's very interesting. When he died in 1971, his wife wrote this detailed book about their lives and what they did, and she was a co-creator with him for the project. It takes two to create, Wright brothers, for example, two or more, and they created television, and then they created the controlled small-scale nuclear fusion, which of course big companies didn't like that at all, and that's
right. And
we see that over and over.
And we have talked a lot about inventions and inventors who have struggled against consensus, big industry, and other forces. Now, everybody watching knows that electronic television works. Very few people probably know the story and the struggle Farnsworth had to keep ownership over his invention, and also very few know about the fusion work he did,
right,
and the obstacles he ran into for holding on to his own patents,
right,
and keeping them from big business. But that's all in that book. Highly recommend it. A little bit of a digression there, but I think this lays out a nice baseline picture for what you worked on, the scope of the work, and I know there is a lot more here, and I know we are planning on going further with that. But before we wrap today, David, is there anything else you want to comment on?
yes.
Okay.
So my comment or comments are these: that when I began this project back in 1999, a large electric aircraft that can carry many people, I was greeted with disbelief and ridicule, or some mixture of them. That was back then. But as the years went by, in recent years, people did develop electric aircraft that could carry one or two or maybe a couple more people. But this year, I was very pleased to find out that a company in Israel, and we give a link to that, has designed, built, and sold an electric aircraft that can carry 9 passengers. So with the captain and the first officer, 9 passengers, it's carrying 11 people. That's still small compared to large aircraft, but it's more than 1 or 2.
Big advancement.
So that's quite a breakthrough. And they get their electric energy from batteries. Lots and lots and lots of batteries, like the big brother of the lithium-ion batteries in your phone. And in fact, 60% of the takeoff weight of this aircraft is batteries.
Wow.
Has a range of 650 miles. That's significant for connecting a very small town to a bigger town to catch another airplane. And the, they say it's much cheaper to operate than the standard type of aircraft. So I look forward that there will be even larger electric aircrafts coming forth. And that's quite an advance in 20 years.
So that's from ridicule to reality. Almost,
That's a good phrase. You gotta remember that
You gotta
phrase.
coin.
Yeah, ridicule to reality in 20 years. Now, so let's look 20 years in the future. So it is my fervent hope that 20 years in the future, even before that, you know, we talk about the free energy and the infinite energy, which are going into a deeper level of nature than batteries to get that energy.
Yeah.
And that this can be fully discovered, developed and brought forth, and that will be a new age. It won't be like it was. And I hope to live long enough to not only see all that happen over the next less than 20 years, but to be a part of helping to bring in this new age. So
I hope you live long enough for that. I hope we all live long enough to see that actually happening. That is what we are doing these videos for, and with the hope of seeing that become a reality, right? And so as we are planning on going further into your work here in our next couple of videos, what are you planning on for the next video? Where do you want to take us for that?
the plan now for the next video, which will be number 23, is to, the ideas, they'll be coming out of volume 2, but it's the research of Peter Lindemann, there he is again, Eric Dollard, and Tom Brown. And they are actually teaching us characteristics of electricity that are almost unknown and seldom taught anywhere. So that's the main thing we'll be covering in the next video, and you don't want to miss that one. So keep checking back or subscribe and then be notified when the next video comes out. And, oh, actually, almost forgot. This work they did is a replication at a small scale of the core work of Nikola Tesla. And that makes it even more fundamentally important.
And they actually did it.
They actually did it at a small scale.
At a small scale, but they did it.
So,
Very interesting.
with all that,
Well, let's
we say,
see you next video.